It's that time again, hard to believe it, but it's time for another high school football season in Shelby County. We're broadcasting out here from Halina High School for our first ever preseason football show as we get ready for the 2019 high school football season. Welcome aboard, everybody. Glad to have you on board for another season. I am Alec Etheridge, the sports editor here at the Shelby County Reporter. As we get ready for the 2019 high school football season across the area, there's going to be a lot of excitement, a lot of things to look forward to. Obviously, most of you are getting ready, are set for that time of the year as high school football season does kick off in just a week and a half. It's hard to believe, and I joked around that, of course, I would choose the hottest day of the summer so far to record this video. That's when you know you're getting close to football season, as these guys have been out here practicing in the morning and the afternoons across the county in this heat, trying to get ready for what they're going to face throughout the season. And it's going to be an exciting season across the county. You may see some new faces on several teams, but that's not going to diminish the product and talent that we're going to see from all the teams, really. I expect a step forward from a lot, and I expect several to continue on that same path that they've been on the last couple of years with success. So we're going to kind of break down each team that we cover throughout this show, give you some things to watch, some concerns with each team, and what to expect ahead of the season, which I just said a minute ago kicks off in a week and a half. So very little time for them to really get prepared. Now it's here, and it's time for them to be ready to play some football games. But like I said, a lot of new things happening. Halina High School, that's why we're broadcasting here. One of those teams that's going to be building a lot of excitement this year. New turf behind me, if you can't tell. State-of-the-art turf that they've put in here. A new scoreboard that's much bigger in person than if you've seen any pictures of it throughout the summer. So this program, one of many with a lot of excitement heading in to the 2019 football season. But we're going to give you every team, break it down as we keep building that excitement up to the high school football season here in a week. So when you start to talk about the 2019 season, obviously we have to start with the team that finished last a season ago, the last team to step on the football field, I should say, to end the 2018 season in Auburn's Jordan-Hare Stadium, and that's the Thompson Warriors. They went on to compete for their first state championship since the 1982 season. Obviously not what they wanted to happen in a 52-7 loss to Central Phoenix City down there, but dealing with injuries, a lot of different things for that program going into that game just made life difficult. But now they're back. They obviously are going to lose a lot of talent. That's another thing that you have to start talking about with the loss of Talia Tungavaloa, the quarterback there who threw for 7,000-plus yards in his 2 seasons with the Warriors. That's obviously impossible to replace. He is a once-in-a-lifetime kind of talent. That being said, they have plenty of talent ready to step in place for not just him, but several guys. Shadrick Bird's going to be gone from this team, had 1,400 rushing yards last season for the Warriors in an all-state season, but they're still going to be loaded at running back, just like they're going to have a capable quarterback ready to step into place. And really this entire offense, aside from the offensive line, has a lot of positives coming back for the 2019 football season. They're going to lose several offensive linemen, and Jamie Simmons, who's now at UAB, as well as center Seth McMillan, was a solid guy. And then, of course, Amari Kite, who is now at the University of Alabama, along with Tungavaloa, the quarterback. So the offense will lose a lot, but they get a lot back. Sawyer Pate, he's ready to step into place and be the starting quarterback this season for the Warriors. And this is a guy that a lot of people may not know a lot about. He's waited his turn. He's been groomed by Coach Freeman, by Talia Tungavaloa himself, and he seems primed to step into place and be a guy that can really lead this team during the 2019 football season. In the spring game alone, threw for 333 yards and 5 touchdowns, found several different receivers. So he showed there, while not in a normal regular season game, that he can kind of handle that pressure and can look around the field and run the offense that Mark Freeman wants him to run in that air raid style attack that he's become accustomed to running each year on the offensive side of the ball. So Pate's going to be a big guy there to step in and really take the snaps this year for the Warriors at quarterback. And while there will be a little bit of a downturn in production possibly, I don't think you're going to see too much of a misconception as far as it goes from his talent standpoint. I think he's going to step in and do just fine and be able to give you what you need in terms of running the offense. And to join him, they're going to have 3 solid running backs back again this year. Jarrett Crockett, JoJo Gators, 2 guys that backed up Shadrick Byrd last year, more than capable of running the offense. And then you bring in a guy like Brandon Franklin, who is a 6'1", 215-pound sophomore. The guy's already stacked like a college player, and he's just a sophomore in high school. Son of Byron Franklin Sr., former Auburn great there on the Plains. So this is a kid that's ready to go as a sophomore, will likely get a lot of reps, if not become the starter throughout the season. He's one to watch as well. But the key to that offensive side of the ball will be the offensive line. If they're able to get some guys to step up early on the offensive line, that's going to be key, replacing those 3 starters really that were all county-worthy starters last year. So that's the key to the entire offense being successful, being able to move the ball, giving Sawyer time to run, and giving those 3 talented running backs a chance to run the ball as well. So in addition to that, the receiving core is going to be outstanding this year. That's another thing. If Sawyer has time to pass the ball back there, if the offensive line gives him that time, they do have Trey Roberson back, who led the team in receiving in the spring game with 105 yards. And then they also get Mike Petway and J.B. Mitchell back, 2 guys that really had a lot of production last year. Petway is a 1,000-plus yard receiver, and J.B. Mitchell was a guy that caught for close to 800 yards a season ago. So those 2 guys close to 2,000 yards when it came to receiving total yardage last year. So that's a talented offense. The defense is going to be the concern, though, going into the 2019 season. This is a defense that loses several top playmakers. Their leaders in interception, DJ Douglas and Jalen Bustamante, combined for 11 interceptions a season ago. And then you have Will Connor led the team in tackles, and several other guys, Eric Mizell, and a few others that are going to be gone from this defense. You do get Jeremiah Alexander back, who was just rated the number 9 overall player for the class of 2022. He's obviously a talented outside linebacker and edge rusher that can give you a lot of production, and had 16 tackles for loss and 6 sacks last year. So he'll be a key to help that defense turn around. But overall, the defense will be a concern from a standpoint of new faces. They have a lot of Division I talent, obviously, that will be there, a lot of guys that can step up and make plays, but at the same time, you're going to have some guys come along quickly and gain that experience early in the season if you want your defense to be on par to where it's been the last few years. But if they're able to come along, this team's going to be dangerous again. You're going to see a lot of things from this Thompson team from the offensive side that they're going to be in just about every game. And if that defense can start to make plays and really come along, they're going to be just as dangerous as they have been in years past. But that depth, the defense itself, the offensive line, those are going to be the keys. If the offensive line and the defense can come along, especially early in the season, and gain some confidence, it's a team that's only going to get better and better as the year goes along, as those guys do gain that experience. But I fully expect the Thompson Warriors to be a team that still contends for the Class 7A Region 3 championship, which is obviously one of the toughest in the state, but also for a state championship, because if you make the playoffs from that region, you're an automatic state championship contender. Moving on in the 7A classification, the Oak Mountain Eagles are going to be a team to watch out for this year, despite last year's 2-8 record, where they really went through a tough stretch, losing 8 in a row. They started off pretty positive with a 42-9 dominant victory against county rival Chelsea to kick off last season, then hit that gauntlet of Hewitt, Trussville, Thompson, and Hoover 3 games in a row in the next 3 after that opener. That's just a tough slate to face early. They actually competed very well against the first 2, Hewitt, Trussville, and Thompson, almost pulled off the upsets, lost a couple of close games, but then depth and injuries really became a concern the rest of the year, and they just never really looked the same offensively after that. This year, however, I do think that the offense will be pretty consistent. If they stay healthy, if the offensive line comes along, they'll be a special team to watch. Evan Smith returns at quarterback last year, close to 1,600 all-purpose yards. A guy that just wowed people as a freshman for his ability to find the hole and just take it to the house and beat some of the best defenders across the county that were seniors or upperclassmen in general, and he just ran right by them with ease. So he's a guy that's going to be exciting to watch this season, as will the running game in general with the return of Jonathan Bennett. They'll have to replace Luke Purser, who was close to a 1,000-yard back last year, But they do get Jonathan Bennett back, who's more than capable of carrying the load, and then some guys like Judah Tate and a couple others that are going to step in and help out as well. Head coach Chris Bell told me that he's really excited about this run game, and they have a lot of promise ahead if they can stay healthy and if the offensive line progresses. The offensive line is going to be the key for that team after losing 6 to graduation last year. So they're going to have to come along fast. They will have a few veteran players that step in, but also a few young players. If they're able to get into the season quickly, kind of turn the page into a veteran status, be some guys that show some experience and gain some experience throughout those first few games and gain some confidence, they're going to be an offense that really can click with the talent that they have around them. While they're going to be an offense that does run the ball the majority of the time with that option attack, Evan Smith has worked on his passing. Was a guy that they wanted to spread the ball around with last year. I think they'll continue to do that this year. They're going to focus more under center and run the ball a little bit more, but he does have a solid receiver in Noah Young, a junior who's 6'4", 200 pounds. If they can form a connection this year, that's going to be dangerous, not just for this year, but next year as well. I think you'll see that happen quite a bit. On the defensive side of the ball, it's going to be completely new. They lose pretty much everybody that made a contribution as far as leading tackler, leading sacks getter, leading interceptions. All those kind of guys are gone. It's going to be a new team, but it is going to have some veterans there that are ready to step in. Their program guys have been there for a while, understand the system. I think the defense will be just fine as far as keeping them in the game. It's going to be the offense, however, for Oak Mountain that wins the games. I think the defense can only do so much to keep them in the game. Offense is going to have to take some long drives, is going to have to move the chains, and keep the defense off the field to keep them healthy, because that's part of the problem that happened last year is that they dropped like flies when it came to injuries. And with depth of concern, you can't have that happen again. So if the defense comes along, kind of like Thompson, defense comes along, the offensive line steps up, it's a team that could be dangerous and compete for a strong playoff spot. I could see them finishing in a 2 or 3 or 4 seed spot this year, specifically a 3 or 4 seed. I think that's very plausible. I don't think there's any excuse for not at least coming close to that chance at making the playoffs for Oak Mountain when it comes to this roster and the team they're going to put out there. For the first time ever under head coach Sean Rainey, the Spain Park Jaguars finished with a losing record last year at 4-6. It marked their first losing record since 2011, which was Chip Lindsey's first year as head coach. So it's been a while since the Jags have struggled like that, and it really wasn't a bad season. They were on the verge of it being a much better season than it was. It was just a difficult year in general for teams that weren't Thompson, Hewitt, Trussville, and Hoover and Mountain Brook in Class 7A Region 3. But Spain Park was right there, and despite a 6-game losing streak, during the beginning and middle of the season, they were able to bounce back, win 3 games by a combined score, I believe, of 105-31. And those 105 points in the final 3 games were more than they scored in their first 7 combined, if that tells you anything about the progression of this team throughout the season last year. Like I said, went on to finish 4-6, but the 2 losses that were key early in the season, obviously they won their opener, then lost their second game by 2 points to Bessemer City in the final seconds. But then after that, the first 2 region games, they lose by 10 points or less to both Vestavia Hills and Mountain Brook. If they win both of those games, they're in the playoffs, and I think they were clicking enough near the end of the season. They could have made some noise in the playoffs too. So this is a team that was on the verge last year, and going into this season, those first few games are going to be key. They have that same start to the season. If they can start out 4-0, even 3-1, and go 1-1 against Mountain Brook and Vestavia, that's huge. That's a big difference maker when it comes to the second half of the season and what you need to do. But I really do think they have the capability, despite a lot of new faces, to go out and start region play at least 2-0. Even if they're 2-2, it doesn't matter. If they can start region play 2-0, that's going to be huge for the Spain Park Jaguars this year. And like I said, you're going to see a lot of new faces out there, and this is going to be a different team than you're used to seeing when it comes to Spain Park football. Normally a ground and pound team that relies on defense and running between the tackles on offense. It's a team that's going to be a lot smaller, a lot more spread out on the offensive side of the ball this year. Good news, they do get Harrison Barker, back at quarterback. 2 years ago, it was Braxton Barker there who had an all-county season. Now his younger brother, twin to Sarah Ashley, who's on the girls basketball team there, is obviously a standout. Harrison Barker, it's his time to shine. He is going to have I expect a pretty good season there for the Jags. just judging from that family's bloodline, they're obviously very talented, and I expect him to have a good season. He played a good bit last year, splitting time at quarterback there with Mason Pronk. So I expect him to come in, really kind of understands the system. He's been there for a while. He knows what to do to run the offense, has a high IQ. Coach Rainey can't talk, Sean Rainey there can't talk enough about how pleased he is with how hard Barker works. So I expect him to step in and be just fine. It's the rest of the offense that's going to be unique to this team, because at running back, you're going to have 3 running backs that are all small, all weigh around 155 pounds, standing at 5'8". They're not going to power through you, even though they can break some tackles. They're more guys. They're going to look for the open hole, make one man miss, and then go to the house. That's their MO when it comes to the run game this year. And to do that, they're also going to have a bunch of smaller offensive linemen than they're used to having as well. It's just part of the game when you're coaching high school football. You're going to have different levels of talent, different kind of guys coming in each year, and this year Spain Park's offensive line is going to be smaller. The good news for that, though, is that they're able to get out into space and block for those running backs when they get to the next level, or for screen passes or so on. That's going to benefit those smaller type running backs, and that's going to be the thing to watch, though, for this team, is those guys at the running back position and on the offensive line with that size differential and the things that they're changing up as far as the offense goes for the 2019 season. At receiver, they're going to have a couple of solid playmakers back. Cooper Kelly's going to be back. Jacob Jenkins is back, and Jenkins is a guy that can go from tight end to H-back to out wide. He can do it all at the receiver position for Spain Park, so he'll be a guy to watch. So the offense should be able to progress, should be able to make some plays. And then on the defensive side of the ball, there are going to be a bunch of new faces, just like we've said throughout this show. They're going to have a lot of new faces, but they're all going to be veterans. They're all going to be guys that know this system. They're upperclassmen, ready to step in. They've waited their turn, and now they're ready. It's kind of the Briarwood philosophy. If you followed Briarwood football closely in Shelby County for the last several years, that's what Spain Park's going to do. These guys have waited their turn. They've been in the program. They know the playbook and what they need to do to be successful, and I expect a lot of those guys to step in and be able to do that. This is a team that should easily be able to come in and finish 6-4 versus 4-6 last year. I think they can turn those 2 games around somewhere on the schedule, maybe upset one of the better teams, but I really think they should be in the games with Mountain Brook and Vestavia, and that's going to be key to their success. If they can win those 2 games, then the sky's the ceiling for them as far as this season goes. If they lose those 2 games, then it brings last year's demons back into their minds, makes things a little bit more tough to get going, especially when you have Hewitt, Trussville, Thompson, and Hoover following those 2 games to start the season. So that fast start is going to be the biggest key that you can expect from the Spain Park Jaguars. If they can get their defense going, that offensive line going, I think this is a team that could be dangerous. It's a team we're used to seeing be successful. I think they're going to have that chance again this season when it comes to doing things that they want to do, but it's all going to depend on that fast start for the Jags. We saw a lot from the Pelham Panthers last year. 2018, they went 7-4 overall, the most wins under head coach Tom Causey since he got there in his tenure. Now he goes into year 5, I believe, and it's a team that's going to look a lot different. At quarterback, you're going to have a guy that's kind of split time the last couple years with Matthew Ryan. That's going to be Xavier Langford. He should be a talented kid that's really put in the work to be good this season. And then at running back, you're going to have a very trustworthy guy in Dylan Peterson who can carry the load as a very big back and knows how to be patient and find the hole. But beyond that, until you get to the secondary on defense, there are new faces everywhere. It's a team that's going to have a lot of young guys that are going to have to step up and make plays this season. So pretty much beyond quarterback and running back, it's a team that's got a lot to prove going into this season. But that being said, I've seen this team throughout the summer a couple times and early in fall practice. They're always known as one of the more physical teams, and that looks to be the case again. These guys are going after it in practice, look to be extremely physical. They're going to be a tough challenge for everybody throughout the season. And to think they're going to take a real big step backwards after they've started to see that winning trend, see some confidence grow, might be a little naive to expect. But with that said, they do have a lot of new faces, a lot of new talent that's going to have to step up and make plays. The secondary on defense is going to be a bright spot. But beyond that, looking at the offense alone, they lose quarterback Matthew Rye, Edward Gibson, a receiver, Brandon Sledge, a receiver, They lose Casey Clark, a receiver, so their top targets are gone, their top quarterback's gone. And then on defense, you lose guys like Ryan Jewell, Brock Higdon. Those are guys that were in the backfield and making tackles every single play, it seemed like. So there's gonna be a hit on this year's team. There's going to be a lot of guys that need to have a chip on their shoulder and want to prove a lot throughout the season. But overall, it's a Pelham team that has a great head coach that knows how to be physical, and they're going to come out and punch you in the gut each and every week. Whether they're able to actually win the games will be determined by the way that they play overall, but they definitely have the physicality to be able to compete in every game. If Langford and Peterson can really form a connection there in the backfield and start making plays on the offensive side of the ball, that's going to be a dangerous combination. But that all depends on the offensive line. The offensive line is the biggest key for this year's team. I do think that the offense has the potential to be every bit as good as last year, that scored more than 30 points per game and was one of the best in the county and the state. But it all depends on the offensive line. That being said, this is a team that isn't going to surprise anybody, but maybe better than people expect after all the talent they lost last year. And I think it may even surprise Coach Causey with how good they're able to turn out to be, just because of simply that physicality I was talking about. So don't sleep on the Pelham Panthers. They started seeing that success last year. I think they build on that and continue to see it in 2019. There's a reason we chose to do our preseason show out here at Halina High School. They've been hyped up all offseason, leading in now with a week and a half to go to the season. They've been hyped up by me as being one of the teams to watch, one team that I really think can compete for a region championship in Class 6A Region 5 this year. And a big reason for that is simply because of what they have coming back. Just about every position returns a starter. They have close to 30 seniors back, with 27 on the roster this year. So it's a team that there's a lot to be excited about. They've done a lot of things in the offseason that have really built that excitement, not to mention going into a second year under head coach Richie Busby. Last year was their first year under him, and he still almost led this team to a playoff berth, had them battling for that in the final game of area play against Pelham last year. But nonetheless, it's a team started 0-4, went on to finish the season 4-6. They won four of their last 6 games there to end the 2018 season, and 2 of their losses last year by 13 points or less, and one of those was by 6 to Jackson Nolan in overtime, who went on to win the region championship. So it was a team that was on the verge last year of being a really good football team in year one under Busby. You give that an off season to kind of boil and mix together, all those players back, Coach Busby back, they know his system. I mean, that just leads to a lot of potential for this team. That being said, they have to be better. It's an offense that scored just 15.4 points per game last year, a defense that was actually pretty good and kept them in a lot of those games, specifically that Jackson Nolan game. But it was an offense that struggled throughout the season, one that's going to have to improve this year, and that's something I think is really possible and should happen. You've got a 3-year starter back at quarterback in Luke Stamba. You've got a 1,000-plus yard back returning at running back in Marquise Johnson, and then you've got several top playmakers at receiver, and the offensive line's returning 4 starters. I mean, that's recipe for success, recipe for them to take a step forward and be successful on the offensive side of the ball if you look at all those pieces that are going to be put in place this year. And I really do think they're going to take that next step. Last year, Stamba was injured for 2 games, so that obviously played a factor in things in how they were able to participate in those 2 games. But also it's a team that was still growing under a first-year head coach. Now they have an understanding of his system, know what it takes, know what they need to do to perfect that, and I expect them to take giant leaps forward this year, mainly because those guys are back. If it was a new roster, this team might struggle again, but with all those upperclassmen back and several guys that know what they're doing on the field, there's something to be said at any level of football about seniors and leaders at that level, and I think that's going to be the crucial factor for Halina this year. And then on the defensive side of the ball, if you look at everybody they have over there, it's going to be just as solid as the offensive side will be. You get guys like Nathan Dunaway back. You get Ladarius Rice back, who got the first Division I offer when it comes to a Power 5 school in Halina High School history. He got an offer from Wisconsin about a month or 2 ago. And you get other guys back on defense that are going to be especially exceptional as well, including Tucker Knight and a few other. Cole Pugh is going to be a guy to look out for. So from defensive line, linebacker's going to have some of those guys move up in Knight and Pugh, but at the same time, you're going to have Nathan Dunaway back at linebacker, and you're going to have a lot of other guys there ready to step in as well. So the front seven's going to be loaded, and then the back end of the defense and the secondary, you've got Rice that's going to lead that position, as well as a couple other guys back there as well. So it's a very talented roster from top to bottom. It just comes down to them being able to make that transition, take that step forward, and really believe in themselves. This is a team that if they can have that belief going into the season, and it'll show on opening night against McAdory whether they can believe that they can win with how they compete in that game. But if it's a team that believes in themselves, they have the talent to do anything they want to this year, including win a region championship. I'm hyping them up tremendously, but it's all up to them to be able to be successful and believe in themselves, to trust the team that's around them, because it's a dang talented team that should really compete for that region championship this year. The Chelsea Hornets are in somewhat of a similar situation to Halina. It's a team that was really on the verge of breaking through under a first-year head coach last year, despite an overall record of 2-8. This is a team that could have easily won 6 or 7 games last year, just looking at the way things kind of rolled throughout the season with close losses, and then winning 2 of their final 3 games, 2 in a row against Minor and Calera there to close out the season. But more incredibly, they lost 5 games by 13 points or less, 4 by 7 or less, and 3 by 4 or less. So that's a team, that's 3 games right there that if you just score one more touchdown or one play goes differently, that, you know, you've won 3 games right off the bat. That automatically puts you above 500, and then you factor in those other 2 games that were by 13 or less and 1 by 7 or less. Is a team that was right there on the verge of being a breakthrough team under first-year head coach Dustin Goodwin. And we saw the quarterback situation was a key last year for them. They really started out slow under Turner Griffin, but he progressed, and he really got an understanding of Goodwin's offense later in the season, leading to those 2 wins in their final 3 games. And once he got an understanding of it, they looked really good, and he stuck with it. Credit to Coach Goodwin and to Turner Griffin for sticking with each other and believing in one another to be able to turn that around. Now you give it an off season, they're going to have a quarterback battle going into this season with Griffin graduating. But that being said, if one of these guys can get that understanding of his system going into the season, that's going to be extremely dangerous if your opponent playing Chelsea, because it's a team that if that offense gets rolling, they're going to be tough to stop. That being said, they've had 4 guys battling for reps throughout the fall so far. Those 4 guys are Nick Neves, Caleb Moore, Jordan Thomas, and then Coosa Valley transfer Brayson Edwards, who grew up in Chelsea as well and has now moved back and should be in the mix for the starting quarterback position as well. But so far I've seen Caleb Moore take a lot of the first-team snaps, and then I've seen a few other guys behind that I think Jordan Thomas has actually started taking second-team reps. But all those guys are capable of running the offense. It's just a matter of learning the offense and what they need to do to be able to make the correct reads and the correct plays. So if one of those guys emerges, gets an understanding of Goodwin's system, that's going to be dangerous to have a full season under him as the head coach, and now an off season. They know what to expect going into this year. And Coach Goodwin simply told me last year he didn't know the team. He was trying to get to know the team. They didn't really have a good understanding of his philosophy. But now their worst days this summer aren't bad at all compared to last year. They understand what they're doing, and the mistakes they made are just fine-tuning things instead of really just reteaching the entire system. So that'll be key. But helping those quarterbacks back in that battle will be Collier Blair, returning at running back. He'll be a junior this year, smaller framed guy, but a guy that's extremely powerful, low center of gravity, and is one of the better backs in the county, and should be something that teams really factor, should be someone that helps take the pressure off of whichever quarterback wins the battle. That being said, the offensive line is also going to be pretty solid this year. They have a lot of guys back. It's the defensive line that's going to be the concern. They lost just about everybody going into fall practice. Coach Goodwin didn't even know who to tell me was going to be a guy that would step up and really just lead at that position or have a unit that they really trusted yet. That's something they were hoping that would be proven during fall practice. So the defensive line is going to be a major concern, possibly the biggest concern. That and the quarterback battle, the 2 things to watch going in to the 2019 season when it comes to the Chelsea Hornets. But on the defensive side, behind the defensive line, linebackers and secondary should both be fairly strong this year. So it's a team that's already got a great defensive coordinator in Zeb Ellison, a great defense over the last couple of years. It kept them in all those games last year that they lost by 5 points or 13 points or less. But the offense is going to have to take a huge step forward early in the season. That's the key. If they can transition early in the season, win some close games quickly, get some confidence, that's going to be the biggest key for this team. Winning those games early can make all the difference in the world and give this team the confidence it needs to be successful during the 2019 season. A team I think could be the biggest surprise across the county is going to be the Calera Eagles. It's a team that finished 1-9 last year under head coach Andrew Zhao. Now they make a transition. Zhao leaves for Bessemer City, and in steps Trey Simpson. He was the team's defensive coordinator, and that bodes well considering the talent they have coming back on the defensive side of the ball specifically. So it's a re-energized, rejuvenated team that I think is going to try to bounce back and prove last year was a fluke. I think these guys are excited to step back on the field. They have a lot of seniors ready to go this year, and they don't want to go out with 1-9 being their legacy. I've been guaranteed that that won't happen this year. They do face a tough schedule, obviously, in their classification and region, but I do think this is a team that's going to take a step forward this year, could win close to 5 games, could finish above 500 if things get clicking, but the concern is going to be the depth on both sides of the ball. We'll touch on that a little bit more in a second, but one of the things to talk about going into the season, obviously, is going to be the transition at quarterback. And Quindarius Cruz, a guy that's, I think, one of the most talented athletes in the county. I don't hesitate in saying that. I've seen him since he was a freshman playing baseball on the varsity level. He's a guy who steps in now as a senior and is one of the most like I said, most talented athletes you can see in this county. You want to try to see him if you get the chance this year. But he's going to step from receiver, where he's had a ton of success the last 2 years as a starter out there, and now he's moving to quarterback, which is going to be a transition. The coaching staff told me that they want to see him take that role, have the ball in his hands every play, and make a play with the ball. So it's yet to be seen what he can do with the ball when it comes to making plays, throwing it, or running it, but he is very talented, and I wouldn't want to face him with the ball in his hands every play. So that's something teams will have to look at. And at receiver, while they do lose him, as he would have been the top target this year, they do get a couple of guys back, specifically in Dylan Killingsworth and a couple others like Dallas Tolson. It's going to be a talented group that will have enough stability on the offensive line. This should be a offense, maybe not that lights up the scoreboard every week, but that is consistent enough, moves the change, and is stable throughout the season to at least score points and stay in the games. Like I said, the offensive line is going to be veteran-laden. They should have most of their guys back there, led by Jason Jones, who's going to be a two-way player again on the defensive and offensive line. Alabama commit, one of the top defensive tackles in the country, already committed to Alabama, so he'll be on the offensive line as well. But that should be a strong suit there. And then moving over to the defensive side of the ball, that defensive line, like I said, is going to be stout, with Jason Jones also suiting up there as one of the biggest disruptors on the defensive side of the ball throughout the entire state and really throughout the country. So he's going to be a guy to watch throughout the season. And then behind that, the defense should be really good. While a lot of the guys are going to be playing on the offensive side of the ball, that's where the issues come into play. They're going to be a solid defensive team. A lot of these guys are back defensively, but the depth is going to be the concern. Those guys are going to be playing a lot of snaps on both sides, and at the 6A level, that just becomes tough to do when you're going up against teams that are 2 and 3 deep a lot of the times, competing for state championships nonetheless from that region. So it's going to be a battle for Calera this season. I do think that they have the talent that will keep them in games. I do think that they have the talent as well to surprise some people, and I do think they're going to be a better football team this year, but they're going to have some young guys step up and prove that they can step in if an injury occurs, if a guy needs to take a water break for a few seconds. There's going to have to be other players step up, because you can't have everybody on your starting on offense also starting on defense the entire game. It just doesn't work. So some guys are going to have to step up and make plays that aren't those starters as well. That being said, the talent's there. They should be much better this year, and I expect them to surprise a lot of people. It's been an interesting time since we last saw the Briarwood Lions. Last year, 26-0 playoff loss to Viger. That's how their season ended. But since then, Head coach Fred Yancey, of 29 years there at Briarwood, has announced his retirement, and in steps a new head coach for a new tenure. But there shouldn't be too much of a drop-off. It's head coach Matthew Forrester now, former defensive coordinator at Briarwood. He spent several years as a player there, one of the best in school history, still the state leader in single-season tackles, third in career tackles in the state. So he's a guy that played under former head coach Fred Yancey, and has been the defensive coordinator there for the last several years, and under Yancey as a assistant coach as well for several years. So he knows what he's doing. He's stepping into a good situation. They keep everybody else on the staff. Bobby Curley's back running the offense again as the offensive coordinator. All the assistants should still be in place, which bodes well for this year's Briarwood team. They return a ton of talent specifically on the offensive side of the ball that needs to step up, while the defense should continue to be just as good as it has been, especially with Forrester calling the shots as the head coach now. But overall, the offense was the problem last year, and it wasn't really a problem. I've said that a lot in my preseason previews and predictions. It wasn't a problem. It's the fact that they went up against teams that were just really good defensively last year, and Coach Forrester told me that recently in an interview, and it's something that he's really tried to tune up in the offseason. As we have to be game planning for the best defense that we are going to face and take that into every week. So I do expect the offense to take a step forward. Last year there were some issues at quarterback trying to figure out what to do. Do they put J.R. Tranrino there, who is one of the best athletes in school history, who's now at Vanderbilt, or do they start a sophomore quarterback in Jonah Carroll? Jonah Carroll did get some playing time in the second half of the season, really seemed to come along throughout the year as well. He's back this year as the starting quarterback. He's projected to be the starter there, and he's looked really good in fall practice. I expect him to take giant leaps forward, and another key is going to be the receiver stepping up. Last year, the wide receiver quarterback connection just never seemed to really form, but I do expect that to change this year. They have a lot more talent at that position, seem to be a lot deeper, and the coaching staff sounds a lot more optimistic that the passing game is going to be a little bit more dangerous this year, and that'll come with the help of the run game, which they returned Luke Pruitt, who's a guy that can easily run for 1,000-plus yards. With Tranrino spending time at receiver and quarterback each of the last 2 years, Luke Pruitt's been starting or playing a good chunk of time since his sophomore year, was a starter last year at running back, and he returns to the backfield this year as a guy that's going to be extremely dangerous and should take a lot of pressure off Jonah Carroll there at the quarterback position and help open up lanes for the passing game as well. The key, however, will be up front on that offensive line. They do return Trent Howard, who's committed to Georgia Tech, as one of the best offensive linemen in the state. The problem is he's the only starter returning. They lose 4 other guys, and that's going to be a big hole to fill. The good news for Briarwood is that, like they've done in years past, they have a lot of seniors stepping up, ready to step in and take on the challenge, guys that know the system and have been part of the system for several years. Now they get their opportunity to step in and into a starting role and really make an impact. You switch over to the defensive side of the ball, and they get something rare, though. The defensive line is going to have just about everybody back, and that's going to be a huge bright spot for this team, something they don't get the luxury of very often. But Parker Will, Cole Garner, and Turner Murphy will all be back starting on the defensive line, and that's going to be huge for this team. The defensive front's always dangerous there at Briarwood, and I expect those guys to make a lot of noise on the defensive front this year. They're going to lose some talent at linebacker, some talent in the secondary, but like I said, guys are ready to step in. It's a defense that really shouldn't skip a beat. Heck, if they give up 15 points per game, that may be a bad season, but it's still going to win them a ton of football games and likely give them a chance to compete for the region championship. I expect that to happen fully this year. Last year, obviously, they lose to Ramsey. That was the game for the region championship last year. It was a tough, hard-fought game. Ramsey just edged them out with that offensive attack. Briarwood couldn't get anything going on the offensive side of the ball. I think those two teams will compete as the number 1 and number 2 preseason teams in Class 5A. Those two teams will compete, obviously, for that region championship, and I think the winner of that region championship has a strong chance to win the state championship this year. So it's going to be an exciting season. Despite the loss of Fred Yancey, I think Matthew Forrester is ready to lead this team to great things in 2019. It's been 10 years since the Shelby County Wildcats have been in the postseason. 2009, the last time they made it there, And it's a team that's really been on the verge, so close several times, including last year. And this year they'll have as good a chance as any to punch that ticket to the postseason in that drought that they desperately want to do. You look at last year's team, it's a team that lost several games, to be exact, 5 by 13 or less. They lost 4 by 10 or less, and they lost 2 games by 6 points. So they were right there, had a chance. They could have easily won those 2 games by 6 points, and then those 4 games they lost by 10 points or less. They were right there to win those as well. So it's an offense that just couldn't make the plays late, but then an offense that got going later in the season. They scored 40-plus points in several of their last few games and still lost 2 of those games. So the defense was the problem late. The offense was the problem early. If they can get those 2 things going and mixing together early in the season this year, that's going to boost their confidence and give them the ability to really reel off some wins, and I expect that could help them have a special season. But like I said, the offense struggled last year, specifically early in the season. They're going to have to score points early this year, and it helps that they have the return of quarterback Chase Halina back and then several other talented athletes that are returning as well. You've got guys like Tyrese Goodman and Raheem Montgomery at running back. They're going to lose their top athlete in Trinity Martin, who's moved back north to Huntsville, but those 2 guys are very athletic and can make a ton of plays on the offensive side of the ball. I expect them to be a major factor, along with the return of quarterback Chase Holloman, while the offensive line is probably as good as it has been in the last 10 years. So when you combine all that offensive talent with an offensive line that knows how to block for head coach Heath Childress' scheme of the option attack, I expect this offense to really carry over that trend of how they ended last season and start this year with that same ability to score close to 40 points per game. So it's a team, if that offense gets going, that can really make some noise throughout the year. But the defense has got to be better. It can't play this season like it ended last year, specifically in the secondary. That's been the biggest key for them on the defensive side of the ball. They've struggled to stop anything, whether teams are throwing over the top or whether there's an open space tackle. Shelby County has really struggled to handle things in the secondary. The best way to stop that is if the front 7 can keep it from happening by disrupting things in the backfield. But if the play does make it to the secondary, they've got to be able to make that play to prevent the score. So the biggest keys there for them this year, get that offense going early and get the defense revved up, get that secondary ready to make some big plays. If they're able to do that, this Shelby County team should be able to end that drought. And I imagine that'll be a good way for a lot of these seniors to go out and a special memory for them to create. So the team that I think should be the best in Shelby County this year, at least give us the best chance at a strong regular season and a really good postseason run, aside from the Thompson Warriors, who are obviously going to be loaded again, that's the Montevallo Bulldogs. It's a team that finished last year 9-1 in the regular season, has the ability to do that again this year in 2019, but they're going to have to really be complacent. I mean, they can't get complacent and look at last year, think they're the best team, because as soon as that happens, somebody's going to come out there and beat them. And early in the season, they're going to have to show a lot, because they still play a lot of teams a classification higher, just like they did a year ago, where they had to make plays late in the game to win those ball games. And if this team can continue that attitude of playing for 4 quarters, never giving in, and always playing hard for those 4 quarters, they have the talent to keep up with and beat anybody in the state this year. That big game obviously is going to be American Christian in region play to determine a region champion, but they're always loaded, so that'll be another tough one. Outside of that, Montevallo shouldn't lose. They really shouldn't. It's a team that comes into the season with everybody back from a 9-1 season a year ago, so it's all up to them whether they believe they can do it again and whether they can stay humble and work hard throughout fall practice, throughout regular season practice, and throughout every game. If they can do that, they're going to be just fine this year. But they obviously are going to return just about everybody. Like I said, quarterback Malikin Bennett's back. He's a guy that was talented, state leader in passing a year ago, 3,376 yards, 201 through the air, 201 rushing yards, and a total of 43 touchdowns. I mean that's just unbelievable. And a big reason for that was the help that you've heard a lot about when it comes to running back and receiver. At running back, he's going to have 1,000 plus yard back there. in Deion Gilliland, who last year had 1,088 rushing yards and 335 reception yards with 17 touchdowns. And then you throw in at receiver, J.J. Evans, an Auburn commit, second all-time in state history in receiving last year for a single season, 1,706 yards with 18 touchdowns, and that's just second all-time by 29 yards. Had he had a bigger role in the playoff game and not had to take over some other roles with injuries, he would have probably broken that record. So he's a guy back as well. So that target or connection for Innibinet and Evans is going to be stellar yet again. You've got a running back to take the pressure off the passing game and make people respect both. And then you've got a couple of other receivers that are going to step up. I think Jamarius Carter is one of the guys that could step up this year, 200-plus yards last year, but only played really in 4 or 5 games. This year he's a full-fledged starter. He's tall, around 6'5". He's the guy that's going to go up and make plays, and they could throw it up to him every time, just like they did to Evans. And I expect Carter to really have a breakout season during his senior season. And then you've got a few other guys like Kyle Cunningham and some others that are going to make some big-time plays as well. So it's an offense that's going to be outstanding. The offensive line's going to have a few new faces. That's going to be the biggest concern on that side of the ball, but you have so much talent back that they know what to expect and how to handle situations if the pocket breaks down, if the block's not there. So that's going to help tremendously. But that offensive line is going to have to come along for this team to at least be able to make a deep postseason run. On the defensive side of the ball, they should also be stout. I expect them to be a little bit better than last year. Almost everybody's back there as well. Specifically, those offensive playmakers are going to step over there and play a lot on the defensive side of the ball, while there will also be some key defenders back that solely play on defense as well. But it's a team that has everything it needs to be successful. I expect them to have another 9-1 season. That's what I predicted. And then it comes down to the playoff spot. If they do get into the playoffs again, last year they lost in the first round. That was a tough pill to swallow, a team that could have really easily competed for a state championship. Now I think they're hungry. I think they not only want to destroy the regular season, I think they want to do that so they can get back to the postseason and destroy the postseason and prove that last year was a fluke. So that's going to this year, winning those close games again early in the season, making the plays late in the games to win them, and then really just staying, not getting ahead of yourselves and staying humble are going to be the big keys for the Montevallo Bulldogs. If they can do that, they have the talent to keep up with anybody, and I expect them to have another big season and win a lot of football games. To close out the preseason show, we'll talk about the Vincent Yellow Jackets, a team that made their first playoff berth since 2014 last year. That being said, they still only finished 3-8 overall, and that came because of 3 wins in a row in the middle of the season. It's a team that really battled over the last few years, has been on the verge, finally punched that ticket to the postseason, but then they just didn't seem to believe enough in winning that postseason game, and I think that's going to be the biggest key in transition going into this season is that belief system, really believing that they can win, believing in one another, and going out there and playing your hardest. If they can do that, I think they continue to take another step forward in Lucas Weatherford's second year there with the Yellow Jackets. It's a team that does return a lot of talent. Tay McGregor and Caleb Wilson will be back at running back. Those are 2 speedy and talented athletes. Quarterback, they're going to be breaking in a new quarterback in Will Harris, who's a guy that's really athletic, can make the throws. I think that's going to be an improvement for them as well. While wide receiver is a concern, they're going to have enough talent to be able to at least move the ball at the 2A level and I think put up some points this year. But depth and health is going to be the biggest concern for this team. At the 2A level, everybody's pretty much playing both sides of the ball, but the offensive and defensive line are going to be so talented that I think that they're going to be able to stay in just about every game that they compete in. And it really starts on the defensive side of the ball. That defensive line should be stout, and that's where you can disrupt a lot of teams' offenses, especially at the 2A level. Now, a lot of these guys are going to be playing 2 ways. The health, the depth, that's going to be the biggest concern for this team, aside from the belief to win games. If they get injuries, that's going to start to plague them throughout the year. But if they stay healthy, the front 7 of the defense and then the offensive line are good enough to help this team be productive. I think they can make some noise. And the biggest key just in general is just to improve, show improvement, not just from last year to this year, try to make the playoffs again, but improve each week, each day throughout the year as well. If they can make those improvements and the adjustments they need to, and then have that belief each week, go into a Monday morning believing that you're going to beat the team that you're about to take on that Friday night. It's a Vincent team that really could take that next step in the program and be a program that's tough to deal with. They have, I think, the talent to be good. It's just a matter of taking it to that next level and believing that they can do it. That's going to do it for our first ever preseason football show here at Halina High School. But don't worry, there's plenty more to come your way throughout the 2019 football season. We'll be doing our weekly recap and preview shows starting next week from Chelsea High School. Our first game of the week will be out there between Chelsea and Oak Mountain. Obviously, that'll just be a preview show early next week as we get ready for the opening week of high school football season across Shelby County. That's going to be a big matchup early in the year for those two teams coming off 2-8 seasons, looking to get off on the right foot. It's a game Oak Mountain won 42-9 last year, so you know the Hornets will be buzzing for redemption early in 2019. So we'll break down that game, all the opening week action, and then the following week we'll get right to it with our SCR Stars of the Week, recap the first week's action, and then move on to look ahead to week 2. That'll be coming your way every week throughout the 2019 high school football season, so make sure you tune in. It's going to be an exciting ride, and I can't wait to see what happens. But for now, that's going to do it from here at Halina High School. I appreciate you joining in, and we'll see you next week.